Hi! Are you on the right path in your life? And do you know yourself well enough to get there? Let's find out with me in this video. Let me ask you a question. What are you trying to achieve in your life? What are your goals? Are you trying to become successful in your business endeavors? Or are you trying to enjoy life as much as possible? Or are you trying to become a good singer or artist? Or do you want to make the world a better place? Let me tell you something. These are all but childish dreams. There's only one goal worthwhile of pursuing in human existence, and that is the goal of self-mastery. Before you turn off the video now, let me explain. This statement has probably offended you. And the first reaction when we are offended by something we hear or we read is usually a defensive one. So we usually will dismiss what the person is saying, will attack their viewpoint, or we just dismiss it and move on. But the ability to listen to something which goes against our current worldview is really a precious one, which only few people are able to do. But I am saying real learning can only occur if you listen to something which doesn't make sense for you, because only then it can broaden your understanding, your horizon. If something sounds nice to you and you have no problem assimilating it, it means you are actually not learning something new, but you're just refining what you already know. You're building on top of your current understanding, of your current worldview. Alright, wanting to help others stop wars. Are these goals of yourself? Because then here we have to be very careful, because oftentimes we use the pretense of helping others, wanting to help others as a noble goal, to not as an excuse to not have to work on our own shortcomings. So keep that in mind when you next time say you want to help others or you want to improve someone. This might again have offended many of you, but I'm saying this, I mean, of course you can have other goals, you can have any goal you want, but I just said this to prove my point. Alright, so if you have your aim set up, what is the very first step to get there? The very first step is to know yourself in your entirety, to understand yourself, how you function. Only if you understand yourself, you have a chance to get to where you want to get. In our current state, like we currently operate, we act like machines. We act automatically. And the way we act is determined by our functions, our routines, our patterns, and our personas. Yes, you heard right. I just said personas. We are not just one person. We have multiple personalities or personas in us, which are active at different times. So in one moment I might be the enjoyer, trying to enjoy life. In the next moment I might be the achiever. I'm working really hard. Then I am the social conformist. And in the next moment I am the rebel, going against the system, breaking rules, etc. So we have also multiple personas governing our life and determining our action. And depending on which one is active at the moment, we will do things differently and say things differently and have different opinions and ambitions. So what is the very first step we need to do? We have to start with neutral observing, without judgment, without coming to conclusions, and without interpreting our center activity and our habits. Why is it important to not judge or come to conclusions at this stage? Because we don't have the required knowledge to come to the right conclusions. So we better not waste our time at the moment and rather just collect now material in the beginning, which only later on we will going to analyze. Alright, so I said center activity and habits, and now I need to explain shortly what is center, what is meant by center activity. So basically we have 4 centers operating in us, and these 4 centers are responsible for various functions we are performing in our everyday life. So the first one is the thinking center. The thinking center works by comparison. It arrives at intellectual conclusions by comparing one concept to another concept, at least 2 concepts. And this is the thinking center, so it's relatively easy to identify actions belonging to this center. The next 2 centers are more difficult to distinguish. They are the emotional and the instinctive center. What they share both in common is that they do not reason or compare as the thinking center does, but so that they share in common. The emotional center is responsible for our feelings and emotions. So there we have the usual spectrum of joy, disgust, fear, and anticipation. Just our ordinary emotions we have in our lives. And the instinctive, on the other hand, is responsible for instinctively perceiving with the 5 sensors, and also feeling of warmth and cold and things like that. And the difference between the 2 is the emotional one is always either pleasant or unpleasant. So an emotion is never just neutral or indifferent, whereas the phenomenon of the instinctive center can be indifferent. So when we see a red car, it might be just indifferent. There's no value attached to it. It's just a red car. It's neither good nor bad. So that is the difference, the subtle difference between emotional and instinctive. And lastly, finally, we have the moving center, which by its name is responsible for the moving functions and things like muscle memory. So a prime example of this is walking, driving, typing. So we don't consciously think about our movements every step when we walk, or how to switch gears when we drive, or where is the key when we type on the keyboard. No, we do this automatically due to the ability of muscle memory and stored, so to say, stored movement procedures. And also a very important one is speech generation. When I am trying to form sentences, I am using my moving center, because it has stored some phrases which are then retrieved and pieced together to form sentences. So these are the 4 centers: thinking, emotional, instinctive, and moving. And what we do now in the observing part is we try to determine to which center an action belongs we do. So for example, let's say we reason with another person, do we use mostly our thinking center for this? So are we staying on an objective level or on a rational level, or how much is the emotional also taking part in the reasoning? How much do we express our emotions while we're doing it? And are we trying to think too much about what we are going to say? That means, for example, the moving center, which should be responsible for making speech more automatic, such that we don't have to think so much about it. If we use our thinking center for it too much, then our speech becomes slow and not like it is now, for example, when I think too much about what I'm going to say. So this is already what we observe, an example of what we observe next. First, we try to assign the functions to the centers, so determine which of the centers is active, or there can also be multiple active at the same time. And the second thing is we observe when a center is performing a task which it's not supposed to do. For example, if we think too much about what we're going to say, or if we try to feel our emotions, but we mistake our thoughts with our emotions, or if we try to understand a person on the emotional level, but we use our rational mind too much for this. So this is a wrong use of the centers. They are not performing the task they're supposed to do. So this is the second thing we are going to observe. And lastly, the third thing which we are going to observe is observing our habits. Why our habits are important? Because 90% of our everyday activity is due to habits which we have formed and which we in most cases are not aware that we have them. And now each of the four centers has its own habits. So let's give a few examples for each. So in the thinking center might have formed a habit where it always judges every situation automatically, without us being aware of that. The emotional center might have formed the habit of reliving past experiences. For example, let's say we drank alcohol and it felt nice because our worries were taken away in that sense. Then the emotional center connects that and it tries to relive that. So our emotional center might have formed the habit of us grabbing to the bottle of beer then, or to the bottle of wine, to relive the experience it had. Then the instinctive center might have formed the habit of a humming in the head of a music piece, so a catchy tune which now repeatedly runs in our head, even though there is no music playing, but we hear it still. So that's a habit of the instinctive center. And then a habit of the moving center finally. Well, the moving center has many habits. In speech, for example, we might use certain filler words all the time, like am, or we might say certain phrases all the time. And that's when the moving center has formed a habit. Alright, and I have one tip for you. If it's difficult to identify the habits, it's a good idea to do things slightly different than you do them usually. For example, when walking, make a little bit larger steps, move your arms differently than you would normally do. If you brush your teeth and you use your right hand normally, do it with the left hand. And doing things differently, the habits will become apparent. Why is that? Because it takes effort to go against the habits. So if we do things differently, we will go against some habits, and that will make them apparent. So I think these points are enough for this video, and I will now summarize them points again and give you the homework for the until the next video, which I will also do myself. So first, seek out those things that offend you. Seek them out, that challenge your worldview, and try to wrap your hand around it, because only that is when real learning can occur. So if you're an atheist, go to a mass. If you're a Christian, listen to a Satanist without getting offended. If you're a rational person, listen to a flat earther's argument without getting offended. And if you're a vegan, listen to a meat eater without getting offended. Try to understand their worldview and their arguments from their perspective, even though they don't make sense in your current worldview. But that is where you really have the possibility to go to the next level. So that's first. Second, observe yourself neutrally. Don't judge. Don't come to conclusions yet. Just observe neutrally. And first one, try to assign your activities to the 4 centers, to thinking, emotional, instinctive, and moving. And also observe their activity, their correct activity, and when they are used in the wrong instance. And second, observe your habits. And if you have difficulty observing them, so making them out, spotting them, you do things slightly differently than you would do normally. And then they will become apparent to you. Alright, so that's the homework, which I will also do. It will probably take a few weeks to master, so let's try to focus on this for the next days, next weeks. And that's my recommendation. I will also try it out. Alright, thank you for listening, and see you next time. Bye.